Welcome to another truck hardware installation tutorial. Today we are installing our custom, no-body drill, Gatorback mud flaps on a 2022 Ford Maverick. These mud flaps are a great way to protect and improve the overall look of your vehicle. Remember, this video is to be used as a companion to the included installation instructions. As well, please note that the rear mud flaps in this kit are installed slightly differently on the passenger side of the vehicle. Because of this, we will show you both of the rear mud flap installations separately, beginning with the driver's side rear mud flap. To start, use a trim tool to remove the two push pins circled here. Save the topmost push pin for later reinstallation. With that hardware removed, remove and discard the two screws located on the inside of the wheel well circled here. With that hardware removed, pull back the liner and install spring nut on the factory hole, circled here. Then reinstall the upper push pin to resecure the factory liner in place. Now we will attach the bracket to the flap. Please note that there are two different kinds of brackets used in the rear install, an L bracket and a T bracket. The L bracket is used on the driver's side of the vehicle, and the T bracket on the passenger side. Attach the L bracket to your flap using two sets of sheet metal screws and flat washers. With the bracket now secured, we will begin attaching the flap to the vehicle. Use two sets of sheet metal screws and flat washers to secure the flap to the two lower factory holes on the wheel well. Then proceed to secure the top hole of your flap using a cap screw and offset washer. With the square or other leveling tool, make sure the mud flap is level. We also recommend you take a step back and visually gauge the mud flap to check that it is aligned correctly. Once your flap is level, loosely secure the fasteners holding the flap on the wheel well. With the flap now roughly in place, we will secure the L bracket to the underside of the vehicle. To secure the L bracket, first align the bracket hole alongside the plastic edge on the underside of the vehicle. Then, using a marker, mark on the plastic where the bracket hole sits. Once the hole is marked, drill a 1/4 inch hole through the marked spot of the plastic. Finally, secure the bracket in place using a sheet metal screw and flat washer. Once in place, tighten the bracket hardware. With that done, the rear mud flap is now installed onto the driver's side of the vehicle. Now let's move on to the passenger side. To start installing your rear mud flap on the passenger side of the vehicle, remove the screw located on the bottom of the fender seen here. Save this hardware for later reinstallation. Next, remove and discard the two screws located on the inside of the wheel well circled here. Next, use a trim tool to remove the 2 push pins circled here. Save the topmost push pin for later reinstallation. With that hardware removed, pull back the liner and install a spring nut on the factory hole. Then reinstall the upper push pin to secure the liner in place. Now we will attach the bracket to the flap. This time, we will be installing the T-bracket onto the mud flap. Install the T-bracket using 2 sets of sheet metal screws and flat washers. With the bracket now secured, we will begin attaching the flap to the vehicle. Use 2 sets of sheet metal screws and flat washers to secure the flap to the 2 lower factory holes on the wheel well. Then proceed to secure the top hole of your flap using a cap screw and offset washer. We will now secure the T-bracket. To secure the T-bracket, position the bracket over top the factory hole on the underside of the fender, and reinstall the factory screw removed from there earlier, along with a nylon washer. With a square or other leveling tool, make sure the mud flap is level. We also recommend you take a step back and visually gauge the mud flap to check that it is aligned correctly. Once your flap is level, secure all fasteners. With that done, both rear mud flaps are now fully installed, so let's move on to the front flaps. To start, use a trim tool to remove the 3 push pins circled here. With the push pins removed, pull back the liner and install the J-bracket included with your kit onto the bottommost factory hole. Once the bracket is in place, install a spring nut onto the remaining hole. Next, take your Z bracket and measure the distance between the holes on the bracket. Once this measurement is confirmed, measure that same distance down from the top hole on the factory liner and mark the spot using a marker. Then, using a drill, drill a 1/4 inch hole into the liner where you've marked it. Now pull back the liner and install the long section of the Z bracket onto the upper factory hole using a screw and flat washer. Once installed, reposition the liner. Now we will begin attaching the mud flap to the wheel well. Take the universal bracket included with your kit and place it onto your mud flap. Begin attaching this bracket to the lowest hole on the mud flap using a cap screw and a nylon washer. And secure it in place using a flat washer, lock washer, and hex nut. With this hardware in place, take a sheet metal screw and a nylon washer and install the center hole of the mud flap into the J bracket on the wheel well. Secure the next hole in the flap using a cap screw and nylon washer. Lastly, secure the top hole of the flap using a sheet metal screw and an offset washer. With a square or other leveling tool, make sure the mud flap is level. We also recommend you take a step back and visually gauge the mud flap to check that it is aligned correctly. Once your flap is level, secure all fasteners. Congratulations! You've just finished installing your Gatorback mud flaps. If you found this video helpful, give us a like and subscribe. Check out the rest of our channel and website for additional tips, tricks, and installation guides. Thanks for choosing Truck Hardware.